When you think of airports, what comes to mind? A place to catch a flight, people rushing around with luggage, security checkpoints, and a sense of excitement or dread depending on whether you're coming or going. But there's one airport that doesn't fit the mold: Denver International Airport. People whisper about it, calling it strange, eerie, and filled with dark secrets hidden in plain sight. And it's not just the creepy murals or bizarre statues that draw attention. There's something much bigger lurking beneath, something they've been hiding from us all along. I never believed the rumors. I figured it was all just internet nonsense, until I found myself at the center of it, uncovering a truth so disturbing I wish I could unsee it. This is my story, and I warn you, what you're about to hear may change the way you see the world, especially the places where secrets are buried. I had flown into Denver for work, just a quick business trip. My company had an important meeting, and I had no choice but to attend. The flight itself was uneventful, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something felt off as soon as we began our descent. Maybe it was the way the sky seemed darker over Denver, or maybe it was just my imagination. Either way, I brushed it off. As the plane taxied down the runway, I stared out the window at the sprawling landscape of Denver International Airport. It was enormous, far larger than any airport I'd ever seen. The strange design elements were noticeable right away: the massive, tent-like roof resembling snow-capped mountains, the bizarrely out-of-place statues, and murals that seemed to tell stories of chaos and destruction. But it wasn't until I stepped inside that the real sense of unease hit me. The first thing I noticed was the art. There were murals everywhere, massive paintings that seemed out of place in a place meant for travel. One mural in particular caught my eye, a colorful yet disturbing scene depicting a soldier in a gas mask standing over dead bodies. Children cowered nearby while flames and destruction engulfed the background. I stared at it, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Who would commission something like this for an airport? I shook it off again. "You're overthinking things," I told myself. But as I made my way to baggage claim, I couldn't stop noticing odd details. The layout of the airport was confusing, as if it was deliberately designed to disorient people. Signs seemed to lead nowhere, and long hallways stretched out like a maze. Once I retrieved my luggage, I met up with my colleague, Sarah. She had flown in earlier that morning and was already looking frazzled. "You notice anything weird about this place?" I asked her. She glanced around and nodded, her eyes narrowing. "You mean besides the creepy art and the fact that it feels like we're in some sort of dystopian nightmare?" "Yeah, I noticed." We both laughed, trying to shake off the strange vibe, but it lingered. We grabbed a cab and headed to the hotel. On the drive, I pulled up some articles on my phone about the airport. Most of them were typical conspiracy stuff, claims about underground bunkers, secret tunnels, and connections to a shadowy organization. There was even speculation that the runways were shaped like a swastika when viewed from above, though I wasn't sure if that was true. I didn't really buy into any of it, but the deeper I dug, the more unsettled I felt. People who had worked at the airport spoke of strange construction projects, unexplained delays, and security that went far beyond what was necessary. And then there were the theories about a hidden underground city. I closed my phone and leaned back in the seat. "People are insane," I muttered to myself. But a small part of me couldn't help but wonder, what if there was some truth to it? The meeting went well as far as business meetings go, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling me back to the airport. That night, back in my hotel room, I found myself scrolling through more and more articles about the place. People claimed that beneath the airport was an entire underground facility designed to house something or someone that the public wasn't meant to know about. Some said it was a military bunker. Others believed it was a safe haven for the elite in case of global catastrophe. There was one thing that kept popping up: the tunnels. Apparently, the construction of the airport had been plagued by delays because of a series of underground tunnels. No one seemed to know why they were there or what purpose they served. And then there were rumors of people going missing, construction workers mostly, who had been sent down into the tunnels and never came back. I leaned back in bed, feeling my skin crawl. This was ridiculous. There was no way an airport could be hiding something so sinister, right? But the next morning I couldn't help myself. I had a few hours before my flight, so I headed back to the airport early. I told Sarah I was just going to grab a coffee, but in truth I had another plan. I wandered through the terminal, my eyes scanning every detail. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." I glanced around, making sure no one was watching, and slipped through the door. I found myself in a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were cold, concrete, and the air felt heavy, like the kind of air you find in a basement. I kept walking, my footsteps echoing through the corridor. At the end of the hall was another door, this one with a keypad. I stared at it for a moment, wondering if I should turn back. But then I heard a sound, a low mechanical hum coming from the other side of the door. My curiosity got the better of me. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small multi-tool I always carried with me. After a few minutes of fiddling with the keypad, I heard a soft click. The door swung open. What I saw on the other side stopped me cold. It was a massive underground chamber, far larger than I had expected. The walls were lined with strange machinery, wires snaking across the floor, and lights blinking in the distance. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie. As I stepped inside, I noticed something else. There were people down here, workers dressed in uniforms, moving around like they were going about their daily routines. But there was something off about them. Their movements were too precise, too mechanical. They didn't acknowledge me, didn't even glance in my direction. I felt a chill run down my spine. I shouldn't be here. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, and came face to face with a man in a suit. He looked calm, almost bored, but his eyes were cold. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a low voice. Before I could respond, I felt a sharp pain in my neck. My vision blurred, and the world around me began to fade. The last thing I heard before everything went black was his voice, calm and measured. "You were never supposed to know." I woke up in a small, sterile room. My head was pounding and I felt disoriented. As I tried to sit up, I realized I was strapped to the bed. Panic set in. Where was I? What had they done to me? A door opened, and the man from before stepped inside, followed by two others. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with that same cold expression. "We've been watching you," he said finally. "You've been asking too many questions." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. "What do you want from me?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's not about what we want. It's about what we need to keep hidden." I opened my mouth to speak, but he raised a hand to stop me. "You're not the first to come down here, and you won't be the last. But now that you've seen what's underneath, you'll never leave." My heart raced. "You can't keep me here." He chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "Oh, but we can. And we will." The days that followed were a blur. They kept me in that room, feeding me just enough to keep me alive. Occasionally, someone would come in, asking questions, trying to find out how much I knew. I lied, told them I didn't know anything, that I had just gotten lost. But I knew that wasn't enough. One night, when the guards were switching shifts, I saw my chance. They had become complacent, thinking I was too weak to escape. I managed to free myself from the straps and slipped out of the room. The corridors were empty, the only sound the distant hum of machinery. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I had to get out. Every turn seemed to lead me deeper into the facility, the walls pressing in around me. And then I found it. A door, unmarked, tucked away at the end of a long hallway. I opened it cautiously and stepped inside. What I saw chilled me to the bone. It was a control room filled with monitors showing live feeds of the airport above. But that wasn't the worst part. On one of the screens, I saw something impossible, an enormous underground complex, far larger than the airport itself, stretching out for miles. I stared in horror. They had been hiding this from us all along. This wasn't just an airport. It was something far more sinister, something they didn't want anyone to know about. I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, I heard the door behind me open, and then everything went dark. The end? Or maybe just the beginning. When I woke up again, I was no longer underground. Instead, I found myself in a small, brightly lit room with plain white walls and no windows. It looked like a hospital room, sterile and cold. My head throbbed with a dull ache and my body felt heavy. As I tried to sit up, I realized there were no restraints this time. They weren't keeping me tied down anymore. I stood slowly, testing my balance. Everything felt off. It was like the world had a filter over it, dulling my senses. I cautiously moved toward the door and pressed my ear against it. There were no sounds of footsteps, no voices, just an eerie silence. I turned the knob and to my surprise, the door opened easily. On the other side was a long hallway, stark and empty. I had no idea where I was, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here. They had let me go too easily, and that made me suspicious. It felt like a trap, but I had to keep moving. The hallway led me to an open area with rows of chairs and a large glass window overlooking the tarmac of Denver International Airport. I was back in the airport, but it felt wrong, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. The people walking through the terminal moved normally, but they seemed disconnected, their faces blank and emotionless, as if they were sleepwalking through their lives. I stepped into the terminal, blending in with the crowd. No one looked at me or seemed to notice anything out of the ordinary, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My skin crawled, and every step felt like it was leading me further into something I didn't understand. Then I saw it, a man in a suit standing near one of the gates watching me. It was the same man from the underground facility, the one who had told me I was never supposed to know. Our eyes locked for a moment and a cold chill ran down my spine. He gave a slight nod, almost as if to say, "We're not done yet." I turned and walked faster, weaving through the crowd. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get away from him. I had to escape, but how? They had control over everything, this airport, the underground complex, and it seemed, even the people here. As I rushed toward the exit, something caught my eye. It was one of those strange murals I had noticed when I first arrived. But this time it felt different. There was a hidden message in it, something I hadn't seen before. The mural depicted a chaotic scene of people fleeing from something dark and terrible. But in the corner, almost hidden, there was a figure that stood apart, watching the chaos unfold. The figure was holding a small object, a key or a device of some sort, glowing faintly. I stared at it and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The mural wasn't just art, it was a warning, a clue. My heart raced as I pieced it together. The underground facility, the strange construction, the tunnels, and the blank stares of the people around me. It was all connected. They were hiding something far worse than I had imagined. The airport wasn't just a front for a hidden city. It was part of something much larger, a system designed to control and manipulate. But how deep did it go? I knew I had to get back to the underground complex. Whatever they were hiding, it was down there, and it was the only way I'd get answers. But I couldn't do it alone. That night, I made a call to Sarah. She had noticed something was wrong from the beginning, and I needed someone I could trust. When she picked up, I told her everything. At first, there was silence on the other end of the line. "You're serious?" she finally said, her voice low and tense. "Dead serious," I replied. "There's something going on at that airport, something big. I can't explain it all over the phone, but I need your help. We have to go back there." She hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "All right, meet me tomorrow morning. We'll figure this out together." The next day, Sarah and I returned to the airport, blending in with the crowd once again. But this time, we had a plan. We would find a way back into the restricted areas and get to the tunnels. I wasn't sure how, but I had to believe that somewhere in that underground labyrinth was the answer to what they were hiding. As we made our way through the terminal, I noticed the same strange details I had seen before, the disorienting layout, the blank faces, and the unsettling murals. But now, with Sarah beside me, it felt like we had a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. We headed toward the same door I had slipped through the first time. It was still marked "Authorized Personnel Only," but this time Sarah had come prepared. She pulled out a keycard she had borrowed from a contact in airport security. "You sure about this?" I asked, glancing around nervously. "Not at all," she replied with a grim smile. "But we're doing it anyway." The keycard worked. The door unlocked and we stepped into the same dimly lit hallway. My heart pounded as we made our way deeper into the airport's hidden sections, retracing the steps I had taken before. But this time we weren't alone. I could feel eyes on us, watching from the shadows. As we reached the end of the corridor, Sarah froze. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I strained my ears. At first there was nothing, but then, faintly, I heard it. The low, mechanical hum I had heard before. It was coming from the door ahead, the one I had opened to find the underground chamber. We exchanged a glance, then slowly pushed the door open. The underground complex was just as massive and foreboding as I remembered, but this time, it was eerily quiet. The workers I had seen before were gone, replaced by an unsettling stillness. The machinery hummed in the background, casting strange shadows across the walls. We moved cautiously through the space, keeping to the edges of the chamber. Every step felt like it could be our last, but we pressed on. I knew there was something down here, something they didn't want us to see. Then we found it. At the far end of the chamber was another door, this one larger and more heavily guarded. But there were no people, just cameras and electronic locks. Sarah and I exchanged another glance, and without a word, she got to work on the lock. As the door clicked open, my stomach churned with a mix of fear and anticipation. Beyond the door was a long, descending staircase leading deep underground. The air grew colder as we descended, and the faint sound of machinery faded into the background. At the bottom of the stairs, we found ourselves in a narrow corridor, dimly lit by flickering lights. It felt ancient, like it had been there long before the airport was built. The walls were rough, and the air was damp, carrying a strange metallic scent. At the end of the corridor was a massive steel door. Unlike the others, this one had no keypad, no electronic lock, just a single handle, cold to the touch. I hesitated for a moment, my hand resting on the handle. Whatever was behind that door, it was the reason they had gone to such lengths to hide everything. It was the truth they didn't want us to know. With a deep breath, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. What we saw inside changed everything. The room was vast, far larger than I had expected. In the center was a massive control panel, surrounded by screens displaying live feeds from all over the world. But it wasn't the control panel that drew my attention. It was what was beyond it. At the far end of the room, encased in glass, was something I couldn't comprehend. It was alive, a creature or something that resembled one, suspended in a tank filled with a strange glowing liquid. Its skin was translucent, its body elongated and serpentine, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the glass, watching us. I took a step back, my mind racing. This was what they had been hiding. This was the secret beneath Denver International Airport. Not a city, not a bunker, something far older, something far more dangerous. Sarah's voice broke through my thoughts. What is that?" I shook my head, unable to tear my eyes away from the creature. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here." As we turned to leave, the creature's eyes followed us, unblinking, its presence filling the room with a sense of dread. We ran back up the stairs, our footsteps echoing in the narrow corridor. I didn't look back, but I could feel its eyes on us, even as we raced through the underground complex and back toward the surface. We didn't stop until we were back in the terminal, the bustling noise of the airport drowning out the sound of our ragged breathing. But even then, I knew we weren't safe. We had seen too much, and now they would never stop looking for us. I wish I could say that was the end, that we escaped, and everything went back to normal. But that's not how it works. They're still out there, watching, waiting, and as long as they are, the truth will remain buried. But I've seen what's underneath, and now you have too. Be careful the next time you pass through Denver International Airport, because what they're hiding down there is something far worse than we ever imagined.